Before you call me cruel, answer one question. If a grown man sits through a joke, is the joke humiliating him, or is his silence doing that? I did not betray anyone by letting my ex speak. I only refused to turn one uncomfortable hour into a scene because my husband could not laugh at himself. Of course, he sat with his thumb against the edge of his phone, taking forever to answer. I thought the final dare would prove that everyone in the room understood me. By the end of the game, even my husband would know who had won. My name is Nadia Mercer. I was 43, and I directed user research for a software company in Bristol. My job was to ask uncomfortable questions without losing the room. 8 people, 45 minutes, one difficult subject. If somebody became defensive, I slowed the discussion and reminded them that grown adults could survive discomfort without creating drama. That was how I saw my marriage too. Owen and I had been together 9 years and married 7. In the first years, we had our own way of staying honest. Every Sunday evening, we sat on our narrow balcony with a stack of red question cards. One truth before bed. No phones. No safe answers. Owen had made the cards himself. His handwriting leaned left because he pressed too hard with a pen. He asked simple things that opened large doors. What did I need that week? What had I been afraid to say? Which part of our life still surprised me? Of course, he was never a warm man in the way people mean it. He showed love through lists. When my mother had surgery, he slept in a hospital chair and tracked every tablet she took. 4 days, 12 alarms, not one missed dose. I used to call that devotion. Then he lost a promotion 2 years before the party. He came home, placed his work bag by the stairs, and became quiet for 4 months. I asked whether he still wanted our life. He answered with a new savings plan and a weekend booked for October. One night, he finally admitted that he feared I had chosen him because he was safe. He asked whether Luca had been the man I wanted, and he was only the man I could keep. I held him that night. I told him he was not second. That confession belonged to us. Luca returned at a museum benefit the following spring. He was standing under yellow rooftop lights with a woman I did not know. He looked older, of course, but age had sharpened him. Luca could still make a group lean toward him before he finished a sentence. The woman beside him was Elise, his wife. She was calm, kind, and funny without fighting for attention. I liked her within 10 minutes. Owen came back from the bar while Luca was telling me that I still tilted my head before saying something dangerous. Owen placed a glass in my hand and introduced himself. No jealousy, no scene. That was one reason I trusted the whole arrangement. Elise suggested dinner. Owen agreed first. He said the past did not need to remain threatening if the people in the present behaved honestly. I remember thinking that was the most confident thing he had said in months. By the time I began planning the game night, his confidence looked different. He kept his phone charged and face down beside him, even at home. When I asked a question, his thumb rested on the black edge while he waited before answering. I counted once. 4 seconds. It was the pause of a man retreating from another conversation. That was all. The old red cards were still in the hall cabinet. I took them out because I wanted a new game, a larger room, and people mature enough to answer without hiding. Owen watched me carry the box upstairs. His thumb stayed against his phone. I had already decided what those cards would prove. Our first dinner with Luca and Elise was easy. That mattered because people now act as if every warning arrived with a bell around it. It did not. Elise made lemon chicken. Owen brought wine. Luca burned the bread and blamed the oven. 4 grown adults sat at one table and behaved like 4 grown adults. The first joke was about parking. Owen had chosen a space 2 streets away because the nearest sign had confusing hours. Luca said that was why I married him. After dating a man who ignored every sign, I had found one who read the small print. I laughed. Owen did too. 1 joke, 2 glasses of wine. No victim. By the 4th dinner, Luca had changed the wording. Owen was no longer careful. He was my insurance policy. Luca asked whether stability was romantic when it came with sensible shoes. Elise rolled her eyes at him, but she smiled after I did. That evening, Elise and I carried plates into the kitchen while the men opened another bottle. She asked whether seeing Luca again was strange for me. I said it had been strange for 5 minutes and normal after that. She told me she was glad. Luca had lost several friends after their wedding because people found him difficult in groups. She thought our 4-person friendship might help him become gentler. I promised her there was nothing unsafe in the room. When we returned, Luca had his hand on Owen's shoulder and was asking whether Nadia had finally chosen a man who could survive assembling furniture. Owen removed the hand without making a point of it. I saw the movement. I chose the joke. Owen waited until we were home before he spoke. His thumb rested against his phone on the dining table. He asked why Luca knew about his fear of being the safe choice. I told him Luca did not know anything. Safe was an obvious joke because Owen was reliable. He said Luca had used the exact phrase insurance policy, the same phrase Owen had used during that private conversation after the promotion. Of course, I said he was connecting 2 ordinary words because he wanted a reason to feel attacked. I reminded him that Luca had known me before him. Old partners remember patterns. Grown men did not turn one dinner into an investigation. The next invitation came from Elise, not Luca. She asked us to watch a film at their house with Mara and Dean. That proved the friendship was real to me. Elise sent me photographs of 2 desserts and asked which one Nadia, the expert moderator, would approve. I chose both. Their television refused to connect when the film started. Dean knelt beside the cabinet while Owen opened the screen settings. They found a guest connection and entered a 6-digit pin shown in the corner. 6 numbers. 1 small adapter. 10 minutes of 2 quiet men enjoying a problem that did not require emotion. I asked whether we planned to watch the film before midnight. Lucas said the safe men were still negotiating with the television. Mara laughed into her drink. Owen looked at me before he looked at Luca. His thumb touched the edge of his phone. Then he entered the pin from memory, and the film appeared. I thought nothing of it. Lucas sent me an old photograph the following morning. I was 26 and standing on a hotel balcony in a silver dress, laughing at something outside the frame. He said Owen probably had never seen that version of me. I answered that Owen preferred versions that came with a calendar. That should have been the end. Instead, Luca asked whether I still owned silver dresses. 3 messages became 11. 11 became a deleted thread. Deleting it did not feel like betrayal. It felt like preventing unnecessary drama. Owen had already shown what he could do with 2 ordinary words. Why hand him a whole conversation to misunderstand? Luca and I met in the rear booth of a wine bar the next week. I told Owen I had a late research session. Luca told Elise he had a supplier meeting. We ordered 1 bottle and stayed after the staff began stacking chairs. He asked whether I was happy. I said happiness was a lazy question. He asked whether I felt wanted. That one was better. Luca remembered the wedding where my mother made me apologize before dessert. I had told 1 joke, and she had called me too much for 6 days. Luca said I had never been too much for him. I had been the reason rooms became interesting. Owen had never said anything like that. He had driven my mother to physical therapy. He had repaired the loose balcony rail. He had booked October. Useful things. Safe things. Luca kissed me in the dark booth after the waiter removed our empty glasses. I did not pull away. When we met again at a small hotel near the station, the door closed behind us and the boundary stopped being a question. I sent him the first private photograph 2 nights later. Nothing explicit. A red dress, bare shoulders, the same head tilt he remembered. He answered that the woman in the silver dress had survived. The preview remained in our conversation beside the dates of our next 2 meetings. Elise called me that weekend while Luca was supposedly at the gym. She said he had become distracted and asked whether work had been difficult for him. I listened. I asked careful questions. That was my job, after all. She admitted that making female friends was difficult for her. Women had used her private worries as gossip before. She said I felt safe because I understood both Luca's charm and his limits. I did like her. That is the part nobody wants to leave inside the story. When Owen asked why I smiled at my phone during breakfast, I told him Elise was sending me a story about Luca. That was not fully false. Her message sat directly above his. Owen asked whether the four of us were becoming too involved in one another's marriage. I told him he had been comfortable while the friendship made him look mature. Now that Luca made him feel ordinary, he wanted new rules. His thumb pressed the phone edge. 3 seconds. Then he said rules were not the same as honesty. I heard judgment. He probably meant pain. Owen always waited so long that the difference became useless. The next shared dinner was already on the calendar. I decided I would make him laugh before it ended. The restaurant had a glass alcove at the back, separated from the main room by a sliding panel. Luca had booked it for 8 people. He and Elise sat together. Mara and Dean faced them. Priya took the corner beside Martin, Luca's business partner. Owen sat across from me. The ice in the water glasses made a dry, ticking sound whenever somebody touched the table. Luca began with Owen's jacket. He said the colour looked like something chosen by a committee that feared blue. Martin laughed first. Mara followed. I told Owen the jacket was fine for a man who planned bus routes. Owen managed transport projects, not bus routes, but the shorter version was funnier. At 8 minutes, Luca asked whether Owen scheduled affection between road closures. At 12, he said I had once swum after midnight while a hotel guard shouted from the shore. Owen, he guessed, would have checked the pool rules before removing his watch. I added that Owen kept spare batteries in labelled boxes. People laughed because I laughed. That is how rooms work. The person closest to the subject gives everyone else permission. Luca then asked whether Owen ever surprised me in bed, caught himself, and changed the final word to life. Martin laughed hard enough to cough. Priya stared at the menu, but I said the correction had been unnecessary. Owen liked routines everywhere. Elise told Luca to leave our marriage alone. I answered before he could. I said a marriage strong enough to last 7 years could survive one question. Then I told the table that Owen once scheduled a date night for the same evening he had promised to help his brother move. He had solved the mistake by sending me a calendar update instead of an apology. That story was true. It was also private. Owen had apologized later, but I left that part out because it weakened the rhythm. Owen asked Luca whether every good memory required somebody else to look small. His voice was calm. Too calm. It made the question sound prepared. Luca said Owen was proving the joke by treating dinner like a performance review. Owen started to answer. I stopped him. I said his tone was becoming aggressive and he was embarrassing me in front of my friends. My husband looked around the table. Nobody met his eyes except Elise. I told them Owen had never learned to laugh at himself. Of course, he could make jokes about delayed trains and bad coffee. He only disliked humour when he did not control the ending. That got a stronger laugh. Luca waited until the server left before using the private phrase. He said the problem with being a safe choice was that safe things always believed they had been chosen first. The ticking stopped. Owen looked at me, not Luca. His thumb rested on the edge of his phone. He asked whether I remembered who first heard him use those words. For 1 second, I saw the question beneath the question. He was not asking how Luca knew. He was asking when I had decided his fear belonged to another man. I closed that door. I told him everyone had fears and he did not own the language around them. Then I asked the table whether we could continue one dinner without creating a scene. Mara laughed, but half a second late. Elise reached for her water. The shared tablet beside my handbag lit up. I had brought it for music and photographs. A preview from Luca appeared before the screen dimmed. Friday still works. Same hotel. Owen saw the name. He saw enough of the line. He did not grab it. He did not ask for the password. He turned the tablet face down, checked the time on his phone, and asked whether I wanted to correct anything I had told the room. I said there was nothing to correct. He asked whether Friday meant the coming Friday. I said Luca and I had discussed a restaurant idea for my research team. Luca supported the answer at once and said hotels also had restaurants. The explanation was poor. but I delivered it as if Owen had become rude by requiring one. That shifted the embarrassment back toward him. Owen looked at Luca, then at me. His face held no victory and no anger, only the tired attention of a man listening to a door lock from the other side. He gave me 4 quiet seconds. I counted because his pauses had become a kind of accusation. Then he nodded. Luca moved the conversation to dessert. Priya asked about the museum benefit. Martin told a story about a chef and a broken freezer. The room accepted my answer because I acted as if there had been no question. Later, while Elise and I waited near the toilets, she asked whether the jokes had gone too far. I told her Owen became sensitive whenever Luca was present. She said Luca could be cruel when a room rewarded him. I reminded her that she had laughed. She looked at herself in the mirror and said she knew. That was her complexity. She was not blind. She was simply still willing to trust me more than her own discomfort. On the drive home, Owen did not turn on the radio. He kept both hands on the wheel until we reached a red light. Then his right thumb touched the edge of his phone in the cup holder. He asked whether I understood what had happened at dinner. I told him Luca had made jokes, and he had tried to punish the whole table for laughing. Owen said the table had watched his wife hand a private wound to the man who caused it. I called that dramatic. I said he was making himself the victim because he could not compete with a memory. His face changed then. Not anger. Something smaller. He said he had never asked to compete with Luca. He had asked not to be offered to him. There was nothing clever in the sentence. That made it harder to answer. I shut the car door when we reached home and went upstairs first. Owen slept in the spare room. One night became 4. Luca sent a voice message asking whether the safe man had survived dinner. I answered from my office car park. I said Owen always became angry and then did nothing. I said public jokes suited Luca because he knew how to hold a room. I listened to my recording once before sending it. My voice sounded controlled. Professional, almost. At work the next evening, I found a stack of red card in the supply cupboard. I cut one rectangle, then another. Truth in white letters, dare in black. The old balcony cards had been private. That was why Owen could control every answer with silence. My game would have witnesses. Irina declined the invitation before I finished describing it. My sister lived 30 minutes away and usually accepted free food without asking who would be there. This time she asked why I needed an audience to prove my husband was humorless. We were sitting on her covered porch while rain tapped the plastic roof. She had made tea and forgotten to offer me any. I told her it was one game, 2 couples, a few friends, grown adults. She said our mother had punished me for being loud, and I had spent 27 years making sure nobody could punish me that way again. Then she asked why I was doing the same thing to Owen. Of course, I said she was comparing a family humiliation with harmless jokes. Irina asked who had decided they were harmless. I put my coat on. There was no reason to let one cup of tea become a scene. Her phone lit on the porch rail as I reached the gate. Owen's name was on the screen. Irina turned it over instead of answering while I could still see her. I assumed he had begun recruiting my own family and that she would call him back once I left. Owen was in the den when I returned. The shared tablet lay beside him, connected to a new charger. My phone still mirrored messages to it because I used both devices for music and photographs. I had forgotten that detail until I saw the screen. He closed the cover before I could read it. His thumb stayed against his phone. I asked whether he had been checking my messages. He said a notification had appeared on a device we both used. He asked again whether I wanted to tell him something before he asked a more specific question. I gave him a controlled piece of the truth. Luca flirted with me. I enjoyed being wanted. We had exchanged photographs, but nothing he needed to turn into a trial. Owen asked whether we had met alone. I said once for a drink. He asked whether once was my final answer. That phrasing irritated me. I told him he was not moderating me in my own house. He looked toward the hall cabinet where the old red cards had been. He said those cards once made him believe we could tell an ugly truth before it became an ugly life. His eyes were wet, though no tear fell. Owen was never dramatic enough to cry when tears might have helped. He admitted that after losing the promotion, he had turned into a schedule. He had tried to protect us by becoming useful, and usefulness had left me alone beside him. He said that part belonged to him. For a few breaths, he sounded like the man from the balcony. Then he asked whether I had slept with Luca. I said no. One word. Clean. False. Owen offered me another chance. He said I could tell him privately, cancel the game, and keep our guests outside whatever came next. I accused him of using a late confession about his own failures to force mine. That was weaponized emotion, even if the emotion was quiet. I told him I would reduce contact with Luca, but I would not surrender friends because my husband had finally decided to speak. The partial truth did not calm him. It removed something. He picked up the tablet and carried it into the spare room. I called that controlling too. The next afternoon, Elise sent a voice message while I sat in my car beneath the office. She thanked me for listening to her. She said she had not trusted another woman with her marriage in years. Luca had been distant, and she feared he was tired of being responsible for another person's happiness. She also said she would be at a late training night at work on Thursday. Luca's message arrived 9 seconds later. He asked whether Thursday could belong to us because Elise would be away. 2 messages. 1 screen. My finger stayed above his name. I could see the shape for a moment. Elise was not only my friend in that arrangement. Her trust gave me schedules, excuses, and a front door where nobody questioned my arrival. Then I remembered how sincerely I listened to her. People use strangers. I was not a stranger. Adult relationships could hold 2 truths without becoming simple. I closed her message and answered Luca. Thursday worked. Mara visited my research lab after work while I cut the last black cards. She watched me write harmless dares about singing, dancing, and calling an old teacher. Then I left 3 cards blank. She asked whether Luca planned to target Owen again. I said the point of a dare was not knowing what would happen. The old balcony cards lay beside the new stack because I had brought them as a size guide. Owen's questions were still visible in the faded ink. What did I need this week? What had I been afraid to say? Which part of our life still surprised me? Mara picked one up and said those did not look like party questions. I told her private honesty had failed. Owen could sit across from one woman and wait until silence made her surrender. A larger group kept the answers fair because witnesses did not let one person control the mood. Mara turned the old card over. On the back, Owen had written the date of our 3rd anniversary and a small note saying Nadia answered even when the answer hurt. I took it from her and used it to trace another red rectangle. Mara suggested keeping the game short. She said the restaurant had stopped being funny before dessert. I asked whether Owen had called her. She denied it too quickly. I decided he was building a private campaign because public confidence had failed him. Dean arrived to collect Mara. He carried a small black adapter and handed it to Owen in the hall. Owen had come to drive me home. Dean said the connection worked now and the television had remembered the device. Owen thanked him and put the adapter in his coat pocket. I assumed they meant party photographs. Dean loved equipment. Owen loved preparation. Neither man could enter a room without solving a problem nobody else had seen. In the car, Owen asked one final time whether I wanted to cancel. I told him cancelling would tell everyone his insecurity controlled our friendships. His thumb pressed the phone edge. He said he would come and stay until the game was finished. That sounded like progress. I spent Friday arranging the cards in 2 clean stacks. Red for truth. Black for dare. The blank card went on top. Elise moved 2 chairs into the living room because Nadia, the moderator, wanted a circle. That was how she introduced me. 8 people sat around the low walnut table. Elise, Luca, Owen, Mara, Dean, Priya, Martin, and me. The handmade cards looked better beneath the warm lamps than they had under my office lights. Red truths. Black dares. A glass bowl in the center. Owen drank water. His phone lay beside the glass, fully charged and face down, while the glass base covered one corner of a red card. His thumb touched the phone's edge whenever the room became loud. We began gently. Priya admitted she had lied about liking Martin's new restaurant logo. Dean had to sing the first verse of a song and forgot half the words. Mara dared me to show the last photograph on my phone, so I held up a picture of the cards. Of course, the private album was locked. 20 minutes passed, everyone relaxed. Then Luca drew the blank black card. He asked who chose the dare. I said I did. My task was simple. Luca had to tell his best jokes about Owen, including the ones he normally avoided while Owen was present. Elise said my name softly. Not a warning yet. More like a request to hear myself. Owen looked at me. His thumb rested on the phone. I told them it was a game. Luca began with the jacket from the restaurant. He said Owen dressed like a man whose clothes had signed a peace agreement. Martin laughed. Priya covered her mouth. At 8 minutes, he moved to Owen's work. He asked whether transport planners practiced being delayed in every part of life. I added that Owen could turn a weekend into a spreadsheet before breakfast. The room laughed again. Owen asked whether the dare had an ending. I said one joke was not a dare. Luca had dozens. At 17 minutes, Luca described Owen as the kind of man parents wanted their daughters to marry after the daughters stopped wanting anything for themselves. That line was better. Sharp. Specific. Owen looked at me instead of him. I smiled so he would understand that refusing to smile only proved Luca's point. At 26 minutes, the jokes reached his body. Nothing obscene. Luca said Owen carried himself like he apologized to doorways before walking through them. He asked whether confidence could be added to a project schedule. Elise no longer smiled. I reminded everyone that Owen went to the same gym twice a week and still checked the mirror as if results required written approval. The laugh came mostly from me. Owen asked whether humiliating his appearance was what I had meant by mature friendship. I told him his voice was rising. It was not. I warned him not to create a scene in Elise's home. Grown adults could survive a roast. If he interrupted every joke, he would keep us there all night. At 34 minutes, Luca began telling stories about who I had been with him. He described the silver dress, the midnight swim, and the hotel guard. Then he said some women chose stability while keeping passion in a private room. That was close to truth. Close enough to make my skin warm. Priya looked from him to me. Martin lowered his drink. Dean sat with both hands between his knees. Mara stood and said she had an early morning. I told her we were almost finished. She kissed the air beside my cheek and left without looking at Owen. Her folded napkin remained on the arm of the chair. 1 person gone. 7 left. Still a room. Luca asked whether he should stop. I told him not to. A dare completed halfway was not a dare. At 43 minutes, he said he knew how I sounded when I was excited, angry, or pretending not to want something. He asked Owen whether it was difficult living with a woman whose first language another man still spoke better. Elise said that was enough. I reminded her that I had approved the dare. If I was not offended, nobody needed to be offended for me. That was how I kept control. I made my permission larger than Owen's pain and Elise's doubt. Owen turned his phone over. The black screen caught the lamp above us. He asked me whether I truly wanted Luca to continue. I said yes. 1 word. Clean. Certain. He waited 4 seconds, then asked if I would stop the game, send everyone home, and tell him the full truth in private. He said whatever happened after that could remain between the people who belonged inside the marriage. Luca leaned back. Elise watched me. I laughed because Owen had chosen the middle of my party for a speech about privacy. I told him he never said what he felt until he had already decided what he planned to do. He waited, collected his thoughts, and returned with a conclusion. He had done it after the promotion. He was doing it again now. Owen said that was true. No defense. No clever turn. Just true. For half a second, the answer removed my balance. Then Luca touched the bowl and asked whether the game would continue. I said it would. That was my voluntary line. At 51 minutes, Luca called Owen a second choice who had mistaken possession for love. I corrected him. Owen had mistaken endurance for being chosen. Priya stopped pretending to laugh. Martin checked his phone. Dean looked toward the television. I looked for Mara. Her chair was empty. The silence pushed against me, so I became louder. I told them Owen had spent years hiding inside practical love and now expected praise because he could sit quietly while other people lived. Owen's thumb remained on his phone. I took out mine beneath the edge of the table and sent Luca one message. I told him I liked when he humiliated Owen in front of people. Owen became angry and still did nothing. Luca's screen lit beside his knee. His smile returned. 58 minutes. He said the funniest thing about Owen was that Owen truly believed he knew his own wife. I laughed first. Elise did not. Dean did not. It did not matter. The dare belonged to me, and I had carried it to the end. Owen looked around the circle. Then he agreed that Luca was right. He said it was time for everyone else to know the truth. I smiled. He had finally learned how to play. Owen stood. He smiled, small and calm, while his thumb moved from the edge of his phone to the screen. The television woke behind Luca. 6 numbers appeared. Owen entered the PIN from memory and fitted Dean's black adapter into his phone. My red card stayed between 2 fingers on the table. The first image was the shared tablet in our den. Beneath it sat the notification from the restaurant. Friday still worked. Same hotel. Then came the wine bar messages, the 2 meeting dates, and the preview of my red dress. The private photographs remained blurred. The words did not. My own voice filled Elise's living room. I heard myself say that Owen became angry, but never did anything. Another message showed how I had used Elise's training night to meet Luca. The last screenshot carried the time from 6 minutes earlier. I had written that I liked watching Luca humiliate my husband in front of people. The hour rearranged itself. Owen did not claim a hidden source. He named the things already inside our homes. The shared tablet had carried my notifications. Its new charger had kept the history available. Dean had shown him the guest PIN. The black adapter had tested the connection. Each time Owen had asked for the truth, I had supplied another denial and left the evidence where both devices could see it. His patience had not created one message. It had only allowed me to finish them. Luca reached for the television cable. Dean caught his wrist and said removing it would change nothing. Owen had already sent the text archive and dates to Dean and Irina. Priya raised her phone and began recording. I tried to say the display was selective. I said private messages could make any friendship look ugly. Dean released Luca and said nobody else had written the words or changed the dates. My explanation stayed in my mouth. Elise looked at the message about her training night. Then she looked at me. She asked whether every coffee, every confidence, and every invitation into her home had only made access to Luca easier. I could not give her the simple answer she deserved. Luca said I had pushed the messages further than he wanted. He said the roast had been my idea. Elise turned on him. She asked why his name appeared beneath every answer. Martin moved his chair away from Luca. Nobody laughed. Owen asked whether I chose truth or dare. I said nothing. He chose truth for me. He asked whether I had become Elise's friend because I liked her, or because friendship made sleeping with her husband easier. Both answers were true. That was why no answer came. Owen's dissolution petition and request for a temporary occupancy schedule were filed the following morning. I moved into a furnished studio above a dental office while Owen remained in the house under the temporary schedule. Our discretionary joint account was restricted to documented household costs. Irina answered practical messages only, Mara stopped calling, and Elise returned my belongings through a courier. Luca moved into his brother's spare room and blocked me after Elise began her own separation. The party recording reached my employer, and I was removed from an executive research program during an internal review. I had spent years believing that controlling the laughter kept me from being the girl publicly called too much. I became the woman who decided whose pain was allowed to count. When the room used my rule on me, I still wanted to call it unfair. Elise sent the handmade deck back without a note, with one red card separated from the rest. Owen's water glass had left a pale ring around the word "Trut."